just a muddy mess. And it's much the same with your spiritual life. When God starts to work with your spiritual life, at first everything's all torn up. At first you get the feeling it's just kind of a muddy mess. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's going. And no matter what seems to happen, it just kind of gets more and more confused and more confused. And that's what happens when God is shaping a spiritual life. You take and God plants the faith. And He gives you a seed of faith. And He gives you a seed of talent. And He gives you a seed of opportunity. And He gives you these seeds and they all start to grow. But even when they start to grow, you can't tell what they are. Nothing is really working the way it should work. Everything appears a little bit confused. You don't know exactly what is happening. And then something happens and the plants start to grow and you get more than a little bit of leaves. You get more than a little bit of plant. You get enough that some fruit starts to appear on the garden plants. And you say, oh, that one's a strawberry. Oh, that one's a cucumber. Oh, there's an eggplant. I think that one's going to be a watermelon. And as they grow bigger and bigger and bigger, you get more and more and more of a concept of what the fruit is going to be that is right there. And you have to go and you have to weed it, and you have to pull the weeds, and you have to get rid of the weeds, and you have to remove them, and you have to water, and you have to take, and you have to fight all the bugs, and you have to fight all of the plagues, and you have to fight all of the rabbits, you have to fight everything that's there, and slowly the garden starts to grow. At the beginning, only the gardener knows exactly what is going to be there. The rest of us do not know. The rest of us don't know what's going to grow. I want to point out that in your spiritual life, the same thing happens. And in the life of David that we're following through this series of texts, in the life of David, we see the same thing, because for the first time in this text, you can start to see the spiritual life of David developing as God intended from the beginning. For the first time, you can understand what is going to happen to David, what has been happening to David, and the muddy mess starts to clear up, and the plants start to grow, and the fruit starts to show, and for the first time, you look at David's life, and you get some idea of what is taking place in his life. Now, the reason I talk this way about David is because I'm not sure it's not that same way in your life. Life is a muddy mess. Everything is difficult. God, I can't see where I'm going. I can't see what I'm supposed to do. I can't see what I'm going through. God, I don't understand exactly what is happening. And then slowly, as the fruit starts to grow, it starts to show what God is doing with your life. That's the text that we see in 2 Samuel chapter 5. And there came all the tribes of Israel to David in Hebron. And there came to David all the tribes of Israel in Hebron. Behold, they said, we are bone of thy bone, and we are flesh of thy flesh. We're one with you, David. See, now things are starting to come together for David, and everybody else can see it too. And so all the 10 tribes. Now I want to point out something here that I don't want you to miss, because this is going to come out, I hope, clearly in this text. You'll be among the few people in America, in the Christian church, in the Messianic movement, you'll be the few people who understand it, that usually in the Old Testament, Israel refers to the 10 tribes. Israel very seldom refers to Judah. Sometimes it does, and people get confused. But we should understand that normally in the Old Testament, when God says Israel, he's talking about the 10 northern tribes that rebelled and got sent into captivity first, lost their culture, lost their religion, lost their language, and had to be brought back to their Messiah by a Babylonian prince called the Pope. And so, the 10 tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron. The garden is there. It's been planted. It's starting to grow. And the food, the fruit, is starting to show. And in the past, in time past, you were the leader who brought us out and took us in. They're buttering up David. They're saying, in the past, you were the one who led us. You were the ones who won the greatest victories. You were the ones who went out to war. You were the ones who came back. You were the ones who were there. And so we would like to follow you. And God was training David through all those things he was going through. Through all the rejection, God was training David. Through all the loss, God was training David. Through all the difficulty. You see, every time we're financially short, we learn to lean on God. Every time there's pressure put on us and we feel rejection from somebody we thought was a really close friend, we learn to lean on God. Every time we get turned off by somebody in the world, we get turned on to a relationship with Yeshua that's deeper and deeper and spiritual and spiritual. And that's what's happening to David. And the Lord came to David and said to David, "Thou shalt lead my people Israel." David was going to be the leader of Israel. "And thou shalt be a captain of Israel." Notice, the 10 tribes are coming, and they're recognizing that David was chosen by God to lead. And they were chosen to come to him. God used the best seed in David, but he still had to plant it, still had to fertilize it, still had to weed it, still had to get rid of the weed deeds that weren't the right thing. He still had to get all that out of the way so that David could become what he could become. Are you right now believing that I am becoming what God wants me to become? All of the difficulty, all of the problems, all of the rejection, all of everything I'm going through is because God is making me something greater tomorrow than I was yesterday. See, we have to believe that. It's not that you're old enough to retire and you can quit. It's not that suddenly all those things in the past, you made it through all those, now you just relax. I always tell people when they come from up north that when you retire, you don't retire from church, you retire to the church because God allows you to have the state now pay for your income so you can give God full time. How many people worked for their boss while they were working a job, and then when they retire from God? It's not the way it should be. God takes a look, and he said, and so, in verse 3, the elders of Israel, the elders of the 10 tribes, came to Hebron. The elders of Israel came to David, the king, and he made a league with them in Hebron. This thing in Hebron is really, really important. And they spoke before the Lord, and they anointed him with oil. that he should be king over them. See, in Hebron, for the first time, you see David becoming the leader king that he was supposed to be when he's led by God in front of the people, and Saul is not there to cloud the picture. Saul is not there to destroy the picture. In Hebron, for the first time in the Garden of David, in the Garden of God for David, you see the fruit starting to take shape, and he is working directly under God, and God is working on him. Verse 4. David, now this is very important. David was 30 years old when he became and began to reign and became the king in Hebron. 30 years old. And he reigned in Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned for 30 years plus 3 years over all Israel. Only David and Solomon in Jerusalem with the temple, with 12 tribes, were together. That was the only time when all of Israel was united. In Jerusalem, with the temple, David and Solomon in Jerusalem. That was the only time where the 12 tribes were all united. It's very important to understand that, or you're going to miss everything that God is going to do in the future. And these numbers are very, very important. David was 30 years old when he began to reign. David was 30 years old. Are you aware that Joseph was 30 years old when he began to reign? John the Baptist was 30 years old when he began his ministry, being the forerunner of Yeshua. Jesus
was 30 years old too.
Was 30 years old when he began to reign. And a priest was 30 years old when he became active in the priesthood. He had to be old enough to be mature enough, but he had to be young enough to slaughter beef. So he had to have that mixture, and he was only allowed to be a priest for 20 years. I should have retired 30 years ago. And Jesus looked at him, and he was 30 years old when he became a priest. You see, all of these facts are tied together because the whole priesthood was this way. And it took place, it started to take place when David was in Hebron. This time in Hebron was extremely important because he had 7 years here where he consolidated things, 7 years where he was in control, and then things started to change when he moved out of Hebron. Yeshua was 30 years old. I want to point something out about Yeshua. Yeshua was 30 years old when he started the ministry. He was in the ministry only 3 years. He was 33 years, and then he was crucified. If you read Genesis chapter 1, you'll see that it says that Elohim, God, 33 times created the earth a fit habitation for mankind. That was God preparing the entire earth, if you will, the universe, for man to take his place and reign with God. That was Genesis 1:1. Then sin entered in, and when he was born, Yeshua had 33 years when he proved that the law could work, when he proved that a perfect man could make it, when he proved that what God desired with the nation of Israel was possible if you followed the law. And then he died on the cross to take away all sin. And there is a parallel here between Yeshua. 33 years he lived the perfect life, and Elohim, that was God, Yeshua, who created the earth a fit habitation for man in Genesis 1. And here we have God creating things and Yeshua recreating things, and it's tied here. And in Hebron was the first time when David was recognized. Notice when Yeshua is walking through Israel, what do often people call him when they want him to heal them, when they want him to make him better, make his eyes better, make his legs better, make all this better? They call him
Son of David.
King of David, descendant of David,
Son of David.
son of David. This is a tie between what Jesus did with his ministry, and it was tied to what his father, the King David, had done starting in Hebron. Verse 7. And David took the stronghold of Zion to become the city of David. I'm going to skip a bunch of the other stuff because you really aren't interested in that. I'm going to go to verse 7. And David took the stronghold and he called it the city of David. Those of you who've been to Israel have seen this. It's really interesting because when you take a look at Jebus, the city of the Jebusites, at the bottom of the hill, there is a waterwork, the pool of Siloam. There is water that comes in at the very bottom of the hill. They took and they built a pool of Siloam at that point at the bottom of the hill. Now the pool of Siloam by Jesus' day was a very interesting thing because it was a large mikvah where you could wash and then go to the temple. And it had 5, they call them porches in King James, very, very bad translation. There were 5 levels or 5 steps that led down into the pool. And each step was about 8 feet wide. So it actually was quite a large area because you've got 8 feet on this step, then you got 8 feet on this step, then you got 8 feet on this step, then you've got 8 feet on this step, then you got the pool. And as the water comes in, the pool will just rise and rise and rise. When there's high water, there's only 1 or 2 of the porches that are showing. When you've got low water, you've got 5 of the porches showing and the water's there. And the people would come here and they would bathe and they would make themselves pure because from here the road went all the way up the hill to Mount Zion, to Temple Mount. They know that this was the road that Yeshua walked on every time he came to Jerusalem. Every time, and if you read the book of John, he's always coming for the feast days. Everything in John is tied to a feast. And so Yeshua came, he washed in the pool of Siloam, then he walked up the hill and he walked up the hill. There were shops on both sides selling all kinds of rigmarole. It's very much like today. You can buy scarves, you can buy stoles, you can buy food, you can buy anything you want, you can buy religious items, you can buy talits, all that kind of thing. And you would walk up there and have all these people buying and selling, and you would walk up there. And they know that this walkway is from the time of Jesus because it was buried. And in our generation, there was a parking lot up at the top, a giant parking lot. And then they started to dig at the parking lot, and they said, wait a minute, we're discovering there are levels under the parking lot. They went down 20 levels and found 20 levels all the way down to the bottom. And in those 20 levels, they find coins. And on this walkway, they found a coin that was buried into the walkway, and they've taken it and they've covered it with glass or plastic or something bulletproof, whatever it would be. They've covered it and it's there in the side, and you can see it, and because it says that this coin was minted in the time of Bar Kokhba. So they know that this coin was buried when Jerusalem was destroyed in the Bar Kokhba revolt. So they know this is the very base level of this street going up. And the very top of the street is what David took, and he built a place called the City of David. I've wanted to go to the City of David for about 20 years. I kept asking the travel company, can we all go to the City of David? And they said, no, you can't fit it into your tour. You're only going 10 days. You have to go 14 days to fit in the City of David. You have to take a bigger, more expensive tour, or we won't send you to the City of David. And then you all know what happened. COVID came. It was a curse to everybody except us. It was a blessing to us, because we're there, and all the airlines took off and they flew out of Israel, and we're stuck without an airline. And so they couldn't get us out, so they didn't know what to do with us. So for 2 days they sent us to the City of David. And we were there, and here's all these ladies running up and down the hill and going there and looking at all the archaeology and seeing what's taking place. And we saw the place on the top where the City of David actually was. We saw the Pool of Siloam in the absolute bottom. We saw where that was, and we saw the relationship of this road. Back when we went, the road wasn't all cleared out. Now the road is all cleared out. Now you can walk it from the bottom right up to the top. You literally can walk the way that Jesus walked to get to the temple. And at the top, there is what's called the City of David. This was the point at which David left Hebron. He had fulfilled his ministry there because he had been the king of Judah. He then had the 10 tribes join him, so he had all 12 tribes together under him in Hebron. This fulfilled God's promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried in Hebron. Sarah's buried. The cave of Machpelah is right there. Joseph is buried there. And so this is what happens in Hebron. And David dwelt there in the fort, which he called the City of David. He built his City of David on the top of this road and right beside the Temple Mount. And the road comes up here, goes to the City of David, walks around the bottom of the temple, goes up on Temple Mount. So David was right there at the City of David. 2 other things I want to share with you that are really important about the City of David today. The City of David today, when you go there, this was David's capital, but his house was also the house of the political. It was like the White House. It was the people's house. It was a political thing. And when you came there, there was a shelf, I'd say it was about this wide, about this high, and was divided into little boxes. And in each one of these boxes, there was what they called bursas. In China, they're called chops. We would call them seals. They're about this long. They're made of clay. And on the end, there is the seal of a lawyer. There is the seal of a scribe. And they went through and found all these had been destroyed and just left on the ground when the City of David was attacked. They found one that is the scribe that Jeremiah used to buy a piece of land that was the promise of God that Israel would come back. They found the seal, the bursa, that Jeremiah's scribe used, and it was there inside the City of David. He was an official scribe working there. The other thing that's quite interesting when you go there, you walk to the city of David, you go over to the side and you look down, and the hill kind of peels away down because you're going down this side, you're going to the Pool of Siloam, and this side you're going. And this was the area where the breezes came in, where all the coolness, the cool desert breezes would come and just cool things off. It was a very nice area to live in, so it's where the rich people lived. And they will point out that if you look right down there, you can see the hot tub where Bathsheba was taking a bath. And you can, from where David is, you can see from his house, and you can look right down to where Bathsheba was. And you can see it all from the city of David. And this is the kind of history that we're talking about in this area. And this is what took place when David came to Jerusalem from Hebron. Verse 10. And David went on, and he grew great, because the Lord of hosts was with him. He knew that he was blessed. He knew that he was prosperous. He knew that God had taken care of him, and he had taken care of God, and he was doing and slowly he was coming out of, and success was his. I want to point out something. First Evangelical. For 20 years, it was a big building. It was empty. It had a few people meeting to worship in it. And then God came with a word. God came with a vision. God came with 5 churches that had no place else to be. And they took them in. And suddenly the ministry started to flourish. Suddenly the ministry started to grow. Suddenly the ministry started to happen. I think it is not an accident that at this point in 2 weeks, God is going to bring a messianic missionary to this place. I think it is really important that we support this. I think it's really important that we pray for it. I think it's really important that we push it, because I think they have a tremendous potential here. They're starting to realize that, you know how close we are to the airport Hilton?
Yes.
Anybody know?
2 minutes.
Yeah.
2 minutes. You know how close we are to Mar-a-Lago? 2 minutes
Really?
the other way.
Yeah.
You know how close we are to the West Palm Beach Airport? 3 minutes. My point is, this is a prime location that God has moved and he has brought people to. And David was that way. In Hebron, God fulfilled the ministry. And then he brought his people to Jerusalem, and he said, this is the place where I'm going to make it happen. You need to believe that when you get to the right place in God, things will start to happen with your life. Oh no, you're too old. Oh no, you failed 4 times in the past. Oh no, you worked 20 years on something and it didn't come into being. No, you can't do that. Somebody else can do that. You're not even on television. You're not here. You're not there. Forget all the nots. When you get to the point, and I'm talking about you personally with your job, with your call, with where people, you get to the right job and God starts to elevate you, God starts to push you, the manager tells you, you better move ahead, you better go ahead, we've got some big things that are going to happen to you. Can you still believe big things? Because David had been running for 20 years. From the time he was 15, 16, he'd been running till he was 30. No success at all. And then God brought him to Hebron. And he had 7 years when God fulfilled his purpose in Hebron, and he brought together the people of Israel under David. And then he came to Jerusalem, and in the city of David, God started. See, and the thing that's really important about this, when it says the city of David, it's important that you and I recognize that these people that Christ healed said, Have mercy on me, son of David. They understood this was the Davidic line. This was the Davidic purpose. This was God working through his people. You've got to not look at yourself and what kind of raw material. You're looking at the garden of your life and saying, God, this is nothing but a muddy mess. God, it's all soupy, it's all messed up, nothing's growing, nothing's planted, nothing's happening. You got to stop looking at that, and you got to start looking at the God who called you to put you in the place where he put you so that he can make it happen through you, so he can make it happen to you. Stop listening to all those people who said you can't do it, you won't do it, it won't happen. And David received the Lord, and he was king over all. And he exalted his kingdom because God was doing it. God was doing it. God was making it happen. God was taking, and God was finally put. See, the more we look at God, the less you can look at your own failure. The more you look at God, the less you can look at what you can't do. The more you look at his power and his opportunity and what he wants you to do, the less you look at yourself. And that's what's really important. That's what God is trying to get through. He saw it in David's life. You take a look at Jesus, Yeshua. Yeshua spent 30 years in relative obscurity. Why didn't he get going when he was in his 20s? Why didn't he get going when he was in his teens? Why didn't he get going? He didn't. He waited till he was 30 because God had a plan and a purpose for his life. And the purpose began when he was 30, and in 3 years. And see, I think it's really significant that he, in 3 years, in the 33 years of his life, he was proving what he wanted to prove, and that was that all of God's plans could now come into being. All of God's plans. When I came to West Palm Beach, didn't have a house, so one of the members of the church took me and the Aarons family, and Dorothy Aarons was married to John. He was a ship captain, and her father was a gardener. And this old geezer, I mean, he must have been 85 when I knew him. He would go out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he would garden, and he would weed, and he would clean, and he would build this garden, and he would, for 3, 4, 5 months at a time, he would go from 6 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and he'd come in just dripping, just perspiring, just sweating. He'd take the cloth off around his neck and put another one there, and he would. And I saw this old man. He took and he rebuilt the fence around his garden at least 12 times because the rabbits kept getting in. The rabbits wanted his food. And then he had to build another fence because the deer came, and the deer could just reach over and they could just eat his food, and they wanted his food. And then the neighbor's cow came in because they had a Cuban neighbor that had a bunch of chickens and cows, and their cows came, and then they went, and the cows went in that. And because it was a good garden, these animals tried to get it. That's the same thing that happened to David. And the Philistines came to David. And the Philistines came to the valley of Rephaim, and then they came to David. What did they do? The Philistines came and they attacked on David. What did he do? He did the right thing. He inquired of the Lord. God, what do I do? I said something last week in my sermon. I said, in the past 6 months, I have learned I cannot live one moment without Yeshua. And this week has been one of these weeks when I couldn't live one moment without God. Because problem after problem after problem after problem, piling up. And God's trying to teach me that things that I say are really significant because you do have to lean on God a moment at a time, and He's not angry. He's not saying, "Oh, come on, are you back again? Didn't I solve that for you last week?" That's not the way God is. You go to Him, and He loves to have you come. And the Philistines came, and David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go get them?" And the Lord says, "Go smite them." And so the Philistines come again. I saw this old guy, he would bug spray every single day to get rid of the bugs that came for his garden. He would build that fence for the rabbits, and then they'd sneak in during the night. Then he'd build smaller wire, chicken wire. He would do that to keep them out. The Philistines came back, and God said, "I've got a better idea." He said, "What I want you to do, I don't want you all to become cocky that you can always beat the Philistines. He said, what I want you to do, I want you this time to sneak out around behind them and hide in the mulberry bushes, the mulberry trees. I want you to hide in those trees behind their camp." Now, mulberry trees are an unusual kind of a tree because they've got these big, heavy leaves in the top, and when the wind blows, the leaves sort of shake like the clomping of a military boot. Clomp, 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 clomp. And God says, when you hear the leaves sounding like the angels are marching in to lead you into war, then you have your people follow the army of God, and you will destroy the Philistines. God was doing everything to make them realize they needed to depend on God. You're building a garden for God. God is building you like a garden. He has to give you good seed, then He has to have you weed, and get rid of the weeds. He's cutting a lot of deeds out of your life that don't belong there, that waste your time, that waste your energy, that waste your opportunity. He's weeding a lot of stuff out of your life and taking it out. But when you hear the marching of the Spirit, follow it. Go with it, because God is getting ready to bless you. Receive now, will you rise for the Aaronic benediction.